studying painting and using photography as a means to create work, I was in love with film as a substance. And I like the whole hands-on idea of cutting it up and bleaching it, and the physicality of it, but existing as a material. It's great that digital media exists because it's so immediate, but I'm really drawn to artists who make and physically touch things, and you can put more of yourself across onto something if you've put things together. I tend to take a lot of material that is weathered and battered from the coast as a way to retain the coast in my studio. I like that interaction with the elements and what your hands can do with that. What I was really interested in for this project was that idea of movement and that silver bar that you can see on the horizon from where I live, about 10 miles away. So the material, the mirrored film that I cut into strips to kind of work with that idea of motion. The fact that it was rotating and moving with the elements, it's kind of akin to the fact that the sea's always running that tidal element. Well, my work was called Reverie, you know, that sense of hypnotic, that kind of lose yourself, that dreamlike quality. Yeah, just that sense of wonder in the work, which sometimes in the gallery can feel quite controlled. And that's why it really pushed me on to do the show, was to actually get people come experience the work in the landscape.
The way I print doesn't involve any machine, doesn't involve any press to print it, all by hands. Printing on the Chinese paper is different from printing on the European paper. The space is kind of very spiritual levels, and I bring the work in is like human level. And then when the spiritual level and meet with the human level, that create even more spatial space. And then when the visitor come in to visit, they'll see, oh, that's something slightly different from what they could expect in the church. I like interactive with my audience, and through get on the way or ask the visitor to help me. Could you give me a hand to hold the paper for just a few seconds? I find that that's the starting point. The window is stained glass, and so you got the colors. Then when the color affects shining on the pillars and onto the print, I try to borrow in the surrounding environment into my work. So I can make my print become more three-dimensional, and then you can have a more connection with the patterns and the colors and also the surrounding environment.
I don't claim to be in any way like an eco-artist or a geographer, but I think my natural instinct is to look at form and how I can intervene with it. I think every sane person recognises that the planet's resources aren't infinite and that waste is a major issue. Not only that we can see, but perhaps more worryingly that we can't. It's thought that human behaviour has impacted so significantly on the Earth's atmosphere that we've now entered a new era of the Anthropocene. Litter and debris is becoming buried. This layer of man-made artefacts is becoming preserved in the stratigraphy and is known as a technofossil. I've applied a very simple act of wrapping and knotting lengths of baler twine around the rocks like a seam along the ridge. Is kind of a recurring thing through my practice anyway, with my background in embroidery and stitch and textiles. So it seemed kind of like a intuitive kind of response to the place. It's a repetitive meditative action, recalls the mending and making of the fishing nets. It's been a pleasure spending time in the landscape, with the ebb and flow of the tide. I hope that in a small way my work might make people think differently about resources and, more importantly, what we value.
I have been making these very elaborate kind of mixed media installations for some time, kind of quite complex with lots of different material components, and predominantly the photographic image, or what I call the photographic object actually. I thought it'd be really interesting to actually think about how I could actually have humans as another material within the final piece. I've written human in my list of materials rather than performer, and that seems like quite an important distinct difference. Everything that I use in my work, all the other materials, are coming from my own direct encounters of places, environments, spaces. It's a relationship I've already formed. And so it felt like that's exactly how it should be with the people that come into the work. So ended up doing a lot of improv, really, and sort of workshopping, just these really spontaneous reactions. And it's an active kind of shutting down and very kind of just sensory kind of engagement, and just going with that very mysterious kind of feeling of what feels right. I think what I really wanted to get out of it was to really push the possibility of animating the photograph further. I'm really interested in the image being unfixed. So I was really wanting to see how it could be through the human body's actual movement, physical kind of wearing of it, shifting it, is sort of animating it, and what new meaning comes from that.
I spent some time just exploring Holy Island and thinking about the process that I wanted to do, and I was really keen to work with this sort of immense sky and landscape and think about being in space. I was also keen to explore another way of using the photographic process to document the process of being in the landscape. It's a response to space, it's a response to location, it's a response to how other people use the space also, and thinking about myself and the body and the landscape and what that means. I just began to really enjoy watching them change and transform with the weather, and how the wind and the landscape animated the cloth and the images on the cloth. This particular opportunity pushed me further. It pushed the scale of the work I do and the way that I expose the photographs, but also the kind of exposure of the work, if you like, or the kind of just being really out there and big. Seeing them with the space and the blue set against the green on the dunes, it's been fantastic and a total privilege to be able to work in such a gorgeous location.
All the work I've done in the past is all about the material and about probably looking at the material from a position of quite an ignorant position and having a play and seeing it for the first time almost, so you see different things in it, you see different possibilities in it. I'm interested in the psychological idea of making as a vehicle for human improvement and deeper understanding. The corporeal act of making meaning, the intuitive and ritualistic bodily acts used whilst making work. I always make things that are just a real struggle for some reason. I've always got to have a real struggle with it, but then the material sort of takes over, so you've just got to work with it. The idea for the piece of work on the Hugh was to test the resilience of the unfired porcelain that was wrapped to the rusting flagpost against the harsh elemental forces on that exposed site. The elevated position also added a monumental and ceremonial dimension. The stones were wonderful, and I like the fact that you had to actually go and look for that at the end of the beach. It's such a wonderful island, isn't it? And it has a real special feel about it.